And, after a night saturated with storms and rain, and not to mention being in the wake of the Oroville Dam emergency out west in California, we knew now was the time to highlight Oklahoma's flood control structures. So to talk about what's in place here, we're joined by the Executive Director of the Oklahoma Conservation Commission, Trey Lamb. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
Well, it's great to be here.
And want to start out west, experts keeping a close eye on this spillway, calling this was an accident waiting to happen. And being with the Conservation Commission, what goes through your head when you see a story like this literally break?
Well, it makes me think that could be us. If we don't take care of the dams that we have, we don't continue to do the inspections on a yearly basis, take care of operation and maintenance, then we could run into that same sort of situation. In 2015, with record flooding in Oklahoma, we have 2,107 of these smaller dams all across the state. We had damage to over 60 of those dams here in Oklahoma. And if we hadn't been making the repairs, had another large flood similar to what they have in California, we could lose a dam. We could be in the same position they're in.
And of those just over 2,000 flood control structures you're talking about, 260 I saw were classified as high hazard if they were to fail.
Right, and that means
what does that mean?
Someone lives below it, so there's a potential for loss of life. Many of these dams were built in the 50s and 60s when there weren't as many people who lived out in the countryside, at least wanted a scenic view. So a lot of people have developed land and built homes downstream. So if one of these dams fails, then we could lose a home. We also have a lot of roads and bridges, interstate highways that are all below these dams. So when we go back and do a classification, if it was originally a low hazard dam, which meant there was no one below it that could be injured, but now someone does, we need to raise the standard, which means we may need to raise the dam and replace the piping and the spillway, which you hear a lot about the principal spillway and the auxiliary spillway on the California dam. So these are key parts of the structures that need to be maintained and replaced.
So do you think an Oroville Dam situation could happen for us here?
I don't think it could happen, say, after a major rain event. The problem is it could happen after the second or third major event if repairs aren't made. We're currently in the process of making repairs on the 2015 flooding. We're almost through. A couple of these projects of repairs were as much as $1 million. But if we wait and don't make the repairs in the spillway, similar to the spillways you see in California, then we could be replacing $5 to $10 million per dam. And if you multiply that by 2,000 dams, you're going to spend over $1 billion. We currently value the whole dam infrastructure at $2 billion in the state. So when we talk about replacing infrastructure, we think about roads and bridges, but we really need to consider our dams that protect those roads and bridges.
Right, and taking it back to the flooding you were talking about from 2015, those structures saved Oklahoma $260 million.
Right.
Just in potential, repairs, or kind of how did they save us that much money?
Well, let's just take, for instance, the dams that are just south of the Arbuckle Mountains, and everyone saw the rock slide in the Arbuckles that shut down I-35. Well, there was one day that they had to close I-35 due to high water. Well, we have over 20 structures on Caddo Creek, which is just on the south side of the Arbuckles. Well, we had 10 of those structures that were damaged. If we would have lost all of those dams during that flooding, we would have lost the I-35 bridge, the Highway 77, 177, and the railroad bridge. So all the major north-south corridors of economic transportation in Oklahoma could have been lost in just one event.
Yeah, that price tag would have just been
astronomical.
Astronomical.
Not only to the structures that were lost and homes that were lost, but also to the economic loss for the state.
And I know you and I were talking just for a few seconds before we went live here. We saw a ton of rain last night.
Right.
Is there any aftermath to our flood control structures this morning because of that, or did we not see enough?
We probably didn't see enough. The whole principle behind these flood controls is that they catch sudden rains, then they slowly release them over time. So since the last rain, they've brought the water levels back down to where they were before that rain, and they keep them at a safe level. Then they can handle a flooding event.
And some people listening here at home right now might be saying, oh, well, that might never happen to me, an Oroville Dam kind of situation. But it turns out 9 out of 10 Oklahomans live within 20 miles of one of these flood structures.
Right, and when we think about what we call the breach inundation area, which is when a dam breaches or breaks what will be underwater or inundated, it's not just within the first 100 yards, the water is going to rise significantly, miles downstream. And so just as in California, they're talking about, evacuating people directly below the dam, but they have a levee system below that's also going to flood. That water is going to be carried downstream. And since these dams do work in a system, if one fails, then we could lose others too.
Okay, and my last question to you, if somebody lives nearby one of these flood control structures, something doesn't seem right, they're worried, where do people turn to first for those concerns?
Right, we have conservation districts that are in every county in the state. They're local people who are responsible for maintaining and taking care of these dams. They utilize both state and federal money, so they can call their local conservation district office. Normally those are in the county seat or in the major town near them, and someone will come out and take a look at it. And that's really, because we have so many and so few employees, local landowners who have these are on private property. That's really our eyes and ears.
Yeah, got to be your own advocate.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Trey Lamb with the Conservation Commission, thank you so much for being with us this morning.